Hey there, this is AJ Pickett, and this is another podcasty episode for the Mighty Gluestick channel where I talk about Dungeons & Dragons topics and I inspire you if I can. I've been asked to do a podcasty episode on Dragon Hoards. Everybody knows that dragons have hoards of gold, jewels, and magic items, but nobody really knows why. Well, I can tell you why it makes perfect sense for a very dangerous monster to have a huge reward actually built into its ecology, because otherwise nobody would bother with the nasty things. Who wants to risk attacking and not killing a dragon for free when you know that that dragon is absolutely going to hunt you down and make you pay dearly for your efforts afterward? I'm talking about the logic we construct inside the game world to explain why the things that make the story work are there. Role players spend a lot of time doing this. I spend a lot of time doing this. If you're listening to this episode, you also spend a lot of time doing this. It's okay, you're among friends. It's a valid answer to just say, because that is how dragons were written in the stories these monsters are based on. The myths and legends of many different cultures that D&D draws on all contribute specific and general themes that we have combined to refine and create the D&D chromatic, metallic, gem, exotic, planar and elemental dragons. Why some keep more to a traditional cultural origin, such as the lung dragons and the norms, I don't know. We only ask, but why inside the game to a certain point, and then the answer just becomes because that is how they are in the fiction of the real world. But there is a hell of a lot of fun to be had before we get to that answer. That's why being a dungeon master is not just a role at the game table, it's a hobby in and of itself. You can be a dungeon master without having any players at all, if you happen to just love world building and speculating on monster ecologies and such. And that's perfectly fine. Go ahead and create more awesome ideas and resources others can use and be inspired by. If you ever hear someone say that it's not a perfectly legit way to play Dungeons & Dragons, tell them to come to have a chat with me. I'll open sacred texts and impart on them the blessed words of Gary Gygax himself. Dungeons & Dragons, we spend a lot of time talking about dungeons, and when it comes to dragons, there's a lot of speculation to be had in regard to their hordes. Today we're going to be looking at Dragon Hoards and different types of dragons and speculative and creative ways that you can enhance these hordes and make them something that your players will enjoy and find memorable within your campaign. So let's dig into the subject, and I'll just let my mind wander, see if anything inspirational or insightful pops out of it. First, we start with a simple question. What is a horde actually for? Is it a part of the dragon's biological process? Could a dragon get sick on a world with no valuables? What about a location where there's no precious metals or gems? I've certainly toyed with this idea a lot, that sleeping on precious metal is really good for the scales and the balance of energy, elemental energy, inside that dragon, and dragonborn. I've talked about the fun idea of dragonborn crafting a blanket of linked precious metal rings, using it to give them a satisfactory night's rest, adding more of their wealth to it in a way that, so they've got thicker rings, more rings per links, double layers, adding gems and platinum and so on. The idea of them carting around this super heavy bedroll, that's a natural target for every thief and bandit on the planet, and the reaction of the dragonborn if their most prized possession is stolen. It's just win-win if you ask me. Consider another option to make the dragon's horde a little more interesting. A red dragon, obsidian dragon, or a gold dragon can all breathe fire. The flame is elemental and very hot. So why not have them melt down all their precious metals and coins and create uniquely draconic sculptures out of them, such as the throne-like platform the dragon has crafted as a very comfortable resting place? What if the dragon has taken an idea like the movie Aliens and sculpted the precious metals and gems into a whole environment designed to conceal draconic creatures like itself and its kobold minions, giving them all advantage on their stealth checks and lots of trapdoors and murder holes to give them extra options in combat? And of course it becomes extremely difficult to move that precious metal once it comes time to actually take the horde away. If the horde serves a role in the mating of dragons, size will probably be a factor, so perhaps the dragon conceals boulders and such, and then inside the piles of gems and coins and arms and armor and books and scrolls and so on to make it look more impressive. These boulders could provide a nice missile weapon for a very strong dragon during combat. Boulder hurling is not just a sport for giants, any big creature can do it. What if the purpose of the horde is also biological, and that the horde has a capacity to build up a static charge of elemental energy that's leeching off the dragons, or the dragon is storing it there somehow? The dragon would barely notice how dangerous this could become, although some immolated, frozen or melted kobolds might prompt it to put up a sign to keep the kobolds off the horde. It's a very simple one-shot trap for the adventurers to deal with, but What if it recharges every time the dragon releases its breath weapon during a fight inside that chamber? Now it becomes a strategic factor and can change the whole course of a combat encounter. I love turning objects into something dynamic that can influence the battle. It really is the secret ingredient to making encounters that keep the players fresh and engaged, particularly if it gives them some additional options in the round when just hurling more and more damage at the enemy gets kind of boring. It provides them some reason to move out of range of the monster which is attacking the other characters in the party, and it has to be pretty compelling to do so. It could be something that over there's a potential to dramatically shift the odds, or over there's something that could halt the battle entirely. Dragon Hoards can absolutely be that sort of object. One way of making a horde that has a lot of plausible logical consistency in the game world is to consider the lifespan and stages of life of the dragon. Its horde represents not just the ancient dragon but all the years of its life leading up to the there and now. So it's got the history of the dragon's activities are stored in its horde. In the first century of a dragon's life, it will concentrate mainly on acquiring golden jewels, building up the bulk of its horde to literally make a nice and comfortable nest for itself. However, as much as it wants to have a huge pile of treasure, it's not that easy to get it, and on top of that, a young dragon often needs to shift the location of its lair as new opportunities arise. At a very young age, it won't have a small army of kobolds to transport all that weight of metal around for them for potentially hundreds of miles. Humanoid races could hardly be trusted to move treasure for the dragon either, though the lizard folk are fairly good at moving around on the surface world undetected and below ground, and they're not that avaricious. If not kobolds, the repulsive troglodytes are also pretty good at making transport runs from one spot connected to the surface world to another. Avoiding the notice of dwarves and drow is the real trick, of course. If the young dragon is a metallic type, it is thrown in its lot with some humanoids that are a good fit for its temperament and worldview. They have a better protection and accommodation than most, but humanoids, you may have noticed, rival dragons for how much they like to accumulate wealth. Though for them, what they can get for the treasure is the point. While for dragons, the treasure is the point. The value of it is in the keeping of it, not giving it away for something else. So while dragons may have a stupendous mountain of gems and coin, they don't and will not use it as currency. They will certainly lie and say that they can buy anything they want, but when it comes to handing over the hoard, they would rather murder anyone who touches it. You may be on the very best terms with the most noble dragon and they will owe you their life. That doesn't mean they owe you their treasure hoard. Avarice is fundamental to the dragon's psyche. They will sit on their hoard for weeks and months, dreaming up scenarios where greedy little thieves try to steal their hoard and they exact murderous vengeance on them. They love it, and the fact that, when younger and not sexually mature, they are compelled by deep instinct to fight other dragons for their lair and their hoard, which later becomes another aspect of their attraction to each other when it's time for them to mate. The more formidable and secure the lair, the more terrible the reputation of the dragon, the larger and more fabulous the legends of their hoard, the more other dragons want to risk mating with them. It's a mating display and measure of their status. Simple as that, really. After a century or so, the young dragon becomes an adult, and the treasure hoard most likely is of a size large enough to destabilize the local economy. An adventurer showing up in a town with several mules loaded down with precious metal is just one of the ridiculous situations that a town or city would have to deal with in a high fantasy environment. This bunch of weapon-swinging mercenaries now has the resources of a major banking institution and really no idea what to do with it. It's your role as the architect of the gaming world to give the players a lot of different challenges and options in regard to their wealth, but we can talk about that some more later, which we will. Dragons, who are expected to fight other dragons for defense of their lair and hoard and life, need every edge they can get. Many of them will not have mastered a lot of magic and have limited experience in fighting other dragons. They can kill damn near any other creature in the natural world, but dragons are formidable threats. They will look for things to put in their hoard that are of use to them, such as spell scrolls, potions, and wondrous items. They may have a few low-level magic weapons and armor thanks to killing quite a few adventurers, but those things are useless to them, just display items to let humanoids know that their lair is certain death for them. Younger dragons will spend less time just sleeping and dreaming about killing thieves and a lot more time taking on creatures like wyverns and drakes that are good practice for fighting dragons and seeking out and learning magic, if they can. They don't make deals with supernatural powers or devote themselves in service to their gods. Dragons just don't have that level of humility, and they have a deep historic aversion to faith. The reason their species is split into the chromatics, metallics, and gems is because of a brutal civil war that they fought among their own kind spurred into madness by the meddling influence of the dragon gods, and not even major gods, it was just the lesser gods Tiamat and Bahamut, who picked the world of Toril as one of their main battlegrounds for their wars. Dragons learned their lesson from that and have survived being cursed for centuries by elven high magic. So they asked themselves, where were the gods during the Dragon Rage years? It's certainly not helping us. Well, they were greatly reduced thanks to many of their faithful followers being killed in the religious wars, and they, in turning away from the worship in the dreadful aftermath of those wars, have reduced the power of their dragon gods even more. So that's something to bear in mind. Anyway, dragons learn arcane magic. They have their own style of magic and their own resources for learning it. They very rarely need to steal the secrets of arcane magic from humanoids, but, they never say never. As the dragon reaches mating age, they become more concerned with maintaining what they have, and as well as access to suitable places in which to tend their eggs and raise their young. This means side lairs, with specific features for the tasks that they perform there. So a lair may just be dedicated to arcane learning and practice, or it may just be a population centre for their kobold minions, or it may be a lair specifically for keeping their offspring safe and healthy. Usually that type will have a heavily influence on the elemental forces that match the dragon's breath weapon type, because the youngsters need that energy in the environment around them just as much as they need food. Oh yeah, talking of locations, looking through old treasure hoard generating random roll tables from early D&D history, I noticed that one thing that is included that seems to have just dropped off the D&D radar is maps. Dragons keep notes on the location of other dragon lairs and the location of specific resources and interesting terrain features. They get around, as well as making and marking locations they suspect may contain ruins loaded with decent amounts of treasure. When rolling for what can be found in a dragon hoard, put some thought into how many maps there may be and what those maps lead to. And when you think about treasure maps, how often do you consider that they may have been written by a dragon? For that matter, what happens when an adventuring party encounter and do battle with a horde of kobolds who are transporting a dragon's hoard from one location to another? This is a recipe for serious problems and epic adventure right there, particularly if the adventurers are just like, oh yay, way more treasure than we expected. Traloo trala, let's go off and spend it. And they pay no attention to hang on a minute, how big is this dragon that we're talking about here? So now the adult dragon is a decent target for a band of heroes who are looking to bankroll their careers and claim a reputation as mighty dragon slayers. Most of the time, though, dragons just happen to lair in locations that have a significant amount of historic importance and a rich source of elemental and arcane power, and the sort of things that encounter locations in D&D are just loaded with, right? So heroes run into dragons often enough without any real need to kill the dragon, and the dragons are generally smart enough to know this, and as long as the little humanoids don't try stealing from the lair and are very respectful and keen to leave the dragon be, most good dragons will just let them go on their way. Even some of the chromatics will just let them go on their way. But even a gold dragon is going to seriously punish a character that lays its filthy little mitts on its hoard or come blundering into its sanctum and making rude demands. There will be enough situations that end violently for the adult dragon to start accumulating a fair amount of high-end adventuring gear, along with magic items and armor, potions, and wondrous items that adventurers particularly like. Also, past breeding age, dragons will go for much longer periods of time between seeking out and taking over new and better lairs. By this stage, they will have attracted the attention of a tribe of kobolds most likely, and found items like portable holes and bags of holding to assist them in transporting treasures back to their lair or moving them from one location to another. At this stage of life, the dragon will be expressing itself quite heavily in the overall structure and decoration of its lair. It will seek out treasured items that fall into the works of art categories, such as mirrors, statues, platters, goblets, ornate boxes and chests, paintings, carvings, tapestries, banners, ceremonial items, war trophies, and famous items of great historic value, such as thrones, crowns, city seals, even hefty things like remaining parts of famous national monuments. And the more powerful the dragon, the more impressive these become. A whole lot of it goes completely unappreciated by the ignorant player characters adventuring, of course, unless they happen to have a cleric, rogue, or bard, or wizard that has some training in arcana and religion, which in 5th edition is how we handle history lessons most of the time. In those cases, the wizard's hat may spontaneously flip on their head due to uncontrolled magic as they gaze at one of the first transcriptions of one of the nether scrolls, or a spellbook written by Bigby, or some such, and they can't even begin to put a monetary value on such a find. They're just like, this will change the wizarding world. The druid, in the meantime, looks over the wizard's shoulder and asks if he can try digging the gems out of the book's cover before the wizard reads it, or whatever. Then the druid spots a glass flask full of seeds from an extinct variety of tree that Lachey brought over with him from the Feywild over 20,000 years ago, and they pee their pants a little bit. The halfling cutpurts ask if the seeds taste good and then trips over a shirt of mithril mail and an elven shortsword that glows blue when orcs are nearby, and has a moment where they fight back tears of wonder. Dragons are highly intelligent and they seek amusement. They could only make the kobolds do so much nonsense before they get bored with them and send them off to their expertly crafted mining operations to continue and contribute more and more nice nuggets of gold and lovely polished gems. Kobolds are really good at mining, by the way. They are really good. They rival dwarves in their mining explorations. They might seek out intelligent items just to have something to converse with that's not going to steal from them. And imagine killing the dragon and having a bunch of intelligent items swearing vows to stop at nothing to make the characters pay for their murderous crime, or a pair of dancing flying weapons making a perfect set of defenders, and also endlessly entertaining for the dragon as it watches them duel each other in flashing and sparking displays over its lair, hurling insults at each other. Or the animated armors versus helmed horrors, having games like, wrestling matches and stuff, or golems that fight regenerating trolls. The dragon may favour a selection of different precious spices to keep its lair smelling lovely, so huge urns of cinnamon, sandalwood, frankincense gum and so on. The dragon may trade ancient and rare books with a lich that dwells not too far away, so there may be a large group of skeletons carting chests full of text who keep leaping to the attack interlopers in the dragon's lair, and the dragon will get really angry if one page, so much as a page, is damaged on these books because they're borrowing them from their friend. Think about the unforeseen side effects of high magic powered items. Like, these things might never have come in close contact with each other, so they're very powerful and slightly unstable magical items. What if there's the occasional magical discharge, or a slow but steady constant one like magical radiation? Food for thought. What if there's some tainted red gold, like in the novels by David Eddings, that can influence the behaviour of those who possess any of it? That makes for some great stories. What if the precious gems become darkened and start to drain the life of anyone who sleeps within 10 feet of them? All sorts of possibilities. There are a number of different forms of skeletal undead that the dragon might not mind leaving buried inside its hoard, and it's possible to have mummies specifically created to activate and hunt down any who disturb the dragon's treasures. Plus, mummies also double as potpourri, with the rose, aloe, thyme, lavender, peppermint, almond, camphor and cedar oil, cassia, myrrh and palm wine used to preserve them. Yep, I actually looked that up. The dragon might steal away with siege engines from old battle sites and restore them to working condition, just like you or I might work on model trains, even staging mock battles with kobolds and other minions, capturing flags and marching around in battle formations in somewhat ridiculous period-accurate uniforms. The dragon might go to huge effort to excavate and transport an ancient magical portal of the Badraki Empire, or proudly display the slumbering sarcophagus of an actually surviving Saruk. You never know what you might strike and what strikes their fancy. Of course, in your role as a dungeon master, it's important to look at both what is practical and logical for the dragon to have in its world as a living creature going about its day-to-day business, and what is needed by your player characters to advance their careers and to assist them in the plans to advance their place in the game world. It's your role to inspire the players to really think about what their characters' long-term objectives are, because as they fight legendary monsters, they become part of those legends. As they rescue villages and defeat foes that were oppressing a whole region for a very long time, they will automatically gain political influence and therefore become either a pawn in the Game of Thrones or a player of it. Nobility may be inherited, but it's not created out of nothing. There's blood on the hands of any ruling family, I assure you. It might be very wise for the player character to spread word that it wasn't them who killed the local dragon, even though they did. They witnessed with their own eyes the local lord of the realm performing the deed, and then generously granting them a gift of part of the beast's treasure for their small part in the battle. A bold-faced lie, but one hell of a smart political move. If you turn up in a dusty cart with a very serviceable and large weapon and a bunch of monster body parts serving as body armor, calling yourself a dragon slayer, people are going to think you are nothing but a disaster waiting to happen. However, a noble with land, title and castle, and with the title Dragon Slayer, is an entirely different story. Heroes in folk tales ride big horses and wear shiny armour and throw their expensive cloaks over piles of ox shit for pretty ladies. That's what the bards are always on about anyway, so it helps if the players the characters conform to the stories, you know? Yes, you can only spend so much money on magical gear. That's one of the major complaints of the game I hear from people. Granted, it can soak up an enormous amount of money to get the very best stuff, if such stuff can even be located and is actually for sale. Most +3 swords are not hanging on shop walls, they're secured among the royal collection of historic artifacts. My advice, never put those items in magic shops. Always involve major thieves guilds having to be hired to steal such item for huge sums of money from very important and influential people. A character showing up in town with a few items like that, which they took from a dragon's hoard, well, they either keep such things a very guarded secret, or they may just be clouted over the skull in their sleep and thrown into the bowels of a fast sailing ship and delivered to a distant land where the nobility simply takes back the heritage items and symbols of their office that had been stolen from them by a monster 100 years ago. The characters may be better served keeping the items locked up until they can have a sage identify them, or they can have access to someone who can cast the 5th level divination spell called Legend Lore, which requires 450 gold worth of components to cast, along with whatever fee the caster may be charging for such a high level spell. And my god, that is such an important spell. Identify doesn't tell you the history of the item, Legend Lore does, and it's incredibly important. Most high-level magic items have historic information surrounding them that is as good as finding a treasure map, so it's well worth it. Anyway, get the players involved in Thieves Guilds and the spy network for the local trades guilds and the noble houses, the arcane academies and the cleric orders. The higher level they become, the more disruption and interest they generate. The more these various groups start to be a real pain in the ass. They can also be massively helpful, providing transport, information and services the characters can't handle themselves. A formidable dragon could have a hoard of treasure massing several hundred tons, far more than a bag of holding can handle, so how are the player characters going to handle it all? Leave it there and hope for the best? Hardly. That stuff will be snapped up by a rival dragon extremely quickly, perhaps within a few days of the dragon's death. Word will have spread to rival or allied dragons and they will be heading out to see if they can add to their own collections. Hiring labourers to cart all that treasure out of there is no easy matter. Dragon Hoards are seriously dangerous. There may be labour unions to deal with it. Every delay will alert more and more bad actors into the situation, such as bandits or other monsters, city factions, and so on. It may pay to sort this all out well before even going to fight the dragon, and have a place set aside where the treasure can be very securely held. Also, keep in mind, hirelings are not stupid, and horse traders don't want to sell all of their mules at once, so you'll really hit the characters with a much higher bill for transportation. It's hard work and very dangerous. What better way to secure the treasure than the character's own guild headquarters, stronghold, keep, or fortified church? There's also a lot of money to finance and require some money for upkeep, while at the same time some will end up generating income for the player who owns them. Other high-level individuals will be retired from adventuring and will take up residence in these locations and work for the player characters, because basically they're not nobles. How about a custom-made scroll with a new variation of an existing spell, a steady supply of holy water? Slap your own label on some crates of healing potions. Train up your hirelings into how to fire a longbow effectively or use a longsword and shield. Have these items crafted on site by your local blacksmith. After a while, there may be a population that grows around these characters' strongholds, and they start to hand them a title like Lord Mayor or some such, and now they're walking in the same circles as established noble families and trading houses. This is a natural occurrence, and it's really our failings as dungeon masters if the players are moaning that they have nothing to spend their money on. They should be bitching and moaning that they can barely afford a decent meal, what with the cost of bricks and mortar and barely skilled artisans these days, while kicking a pile of blueprints in frustration. It should be the normal order of things. Matt Colville got it right when he did his Strongholds and Followers book. Wealth is power, and power in Dungeons & Dragons often comes along with a fancy title and an outrageous hat. Meanwhile, a black dragon rests in its sizzling acidic lair beneath a blighted swamp, amusing itself by tormenting a tarnished mirror, a magic mirror with endless questions, and, oh, what's this? Look at that money those little humanoid adventurers are spending near that new construction site. Might be time to stretch the old wings and go see what they sound like when they're being melted down to their bones. The dragon rises and passes a bunch of alcoves containing the skulls of intelligent undead keeps as pets, barks an order to a pair of stinking flesh golems who go about the task of laying out its magic claw extensions and enchanted harness of spell-storing gems the dragon keeps for such occasions. Sneaking out of a secret passage lined with animated leathery hides of zombies, it floats to the surface of the swamp full of foul parasites and takes wing amid a cloud of darting sturges. Every dragon has an age, a favoured environment, a specific type, and an individual personality that can inspire you to create very weird and wild hoards of treasure for them. Some of it will be no use to adventurers, some of it will be serving to tie their plans more closely in with your game world. Some will be of use as they go on adventures, and some items will likely be the key that lead to further adventures. So think about making some simple modifications to the wondrous items found in the game books. Never be too cautious about making unique items that you can just throw into the game on the fly. Sure, the players may end up using such things in ways you never considered. That's part of the fun. Roll with it. Nothing can break the game because your imagination is the game. Did they break your imagination? No, of course not. If the players are okay with a unique magic item showing up that gives them a huge advantage, they should also accept the fact that something is going to balance that out somewhere along the way, like a disenchanter or a magic disruption cloud, or the wrath of an offended god. Who knows? I'm sure you'll think of something. Okay, that's about it from me. I hope you were inspired somewhat to come up with some really interesting dragon hordes and to have some better awareness of the larger impact these creatures and their activities have on the game world, as well as the aftermath of their eradication and the benefits and problems that player characters may face as they emerge victorious and stupendously loaded with jink. Happy gaming, wear your geek with pride, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.